Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Good to be with you today. Today we're going to finish up our discussion of Plato. We're just hitting the highlights. I think I've told you before, this is English translation of Plato's complete works. It's not everything he ever wrote. It's everything he ever wrote that still exists. And my copy is 1,745 pages long. So we're not mastering 1,700 pages worth of philosophy in about a week, but we're hitting the highlights, giving you an introduction to a really important, though really weird, thinker in our civilization. Today I want to talk about two things to wrap up Plato, and it shouldn't take us very long at all. First, I want to talk about what is Plato's ultimate vision of what reality is actually like. How is existence put together for Plato? And this is something that he never just comes out and says anywhere in his writings. People from Plato's time said that Plato had secret teachings. Secret in the sense that he wouldn't write them down for the whole world to see. He would only tell his students. So there were things he thought were too important to be shared any way other than by verbal communication. But we have people who heard those verbal communications who've told us what Plato said. So this gives us our picture of what Plato thinks reality is actually like. For Plato, the very first reality, and the ultimate, greatest, most important reality, is something Plato calls the one or the good. He uses these terms interchangeably. So oneness or unity and goodness for Plato are the same thing. There's no way to draw a picture of what Plato thinks the good is. The picture I've drawn is sort of, or I haven't, excuse me, I'm not claiming to have drawn this picture. The picture I've chosen is sort of a symbol of what the good is. The same way that all these ideas or forms we were talking about, the way that shoeness is everything it can possibly mean to be a shoe, and horseness everything it could possibly mean to be a horse. For Plato, everything starts with something that is everything it could possibly mean to be good. So Plato's vision of reality is at heart very optimistic. He thinks existence and goodness are the same thing. And the ultimate good that I've depicted with this, that I've chosen this chalice to represent, see how it splashes, how it overflows whatever it's full of. We're going to say it's full of goodness. That's the way Plato's the good is. It has so, yes? No. It has so much goodness within it that it is overflowing out of itself. And it is sharing its goodness with, well, it's the first reality, so nothing else exists. It's not sharing its goodness with anything. It's sharing its goodness, and that becomes everything else. So everything else that exists flows out of this perfect ultimate good. And the first thing that flows out of it is Plato's world. That world of ideas, a world of forms, that higher, better dimension where appleness itself lives, and horseness itself, but also love itself, and truth itself, and beauty itself. In fact, there's lots of resonance in the world of ideas. So you got all the ideas and forms. You got shoeness and chairness and love and truth and beauty. You have, or at least you used to have, all of us. The real us, our souls. Remember, Plato thinks that we're actually millions and billions and jillions of years old. Mariah, how much is a jillion? How many zeros are in a jillion? Don't Google search that on the iPad that they're recording me with.
Yeah.
or they won't be recording me, Libby. No, it's one followed by a jillion zeros. It's not a real number. So for jillions of years, we existed as souls in this perfect world in perfect bliss. And along with us and the ideas was this dude. Plato introduces some kind of somewhere between capital G and small g God. Plato introduces this dude he calls the demiurge. It's a funny sounding name. Jersey, is that your middle name? Demiurge, Maria, Jersey, Demiurge, okay. The Greek word demiurgos means builder or carpenter. Plato says that in this world of ideas, there must be some powerful building, or powerful being, who's going to be responsible for building everything else, for creating everything else. And it's this being, the demiurge, who is the creator of the universe. How does he make the universe? I know this is small, but can anyone see what's going on right there? Libby, what's going on right there?
They're cutting out shapes.
With
like
what?
A cookie cutter or something.
Mm-hmm. It's a picture of somebody making cookies, cutting out shapes with a cookie cutter. What the demiurge does is he takes the ideas, he takes hoarseness itself, and he uses that like a cookie cutter. He pushes that down into the chaotic matter of the universe and forms it into the first horse. And then he takes chairness and he uses it like a cookie cutter to form the first chair, and oceanness and mountainness and everything else to populate the universe. The universe itself is round, it's a circle, Plato says. Why? Well, he wants the universe to be as perfect as it can be. It can't be as perfect as goodness itself, but he wants the universe to be as perfect as can be, because it's sort of the demiurge's tribute to the good. And circle, says Plato, is a perfect shape. Well, how can one shape be perfect other than Plato being weird? Well, he's drawn a circle with his finger on the desk. What's perfect about that circle? Pretend you're Plato.
It's round.
Is round, which means, from Plato's perspective, we didn't talk all the math in Plato, but there's he does lots of math stuff in here too. For Plato, a circle is perfect because it's as if it never begins or never ends. So you find no starting point, no stopping point, so there's a certain almost infinity to a circle. The universe is a circle, the perfect shape. The universe is alive. He thinks the whole universe is a single conscious organism. It's alive, it has its own soul, he calls it the world soul, and it's completely self-contained. As a perfect living being, it has within itself everything it needs to continue living. It doesn't have to look outside of itself for anything, which is good because it's the universe, so there is nothing outside of itself, at least in material reality. What would it be like to be self-contained? It would be like if your pockets grew money. You just go home at night, change in your pajamas, hang your pants up, or throw your pants over the back of a chair, or, who am I kidding? Throw them in the corner on the floor, I'm a dude, and come back in the morning and there's just money in them because your pockets grow money. Those would be self-sustaining, self-contained pants. The universe is like that. It provides itself everything it needs. At the top of the circle, this isn't a perfect representation because, I just Googled circle universe and there it was. At the top of the circle, Plato puts the stars. But the stars at the top of the globe, Plato says, are not just stars, they're also the gods. The stars and the gods for Plato are one and the same thing. Why does he do that? Can't read his mind. A, I'm not psychic. B, he's dead. Here's what I think. Here's what I suspect. I suspect if Plato were capable of being honest, he would say Zeus, Hera, Apollo, Athena don't exist. They're not real. But you can't say that in ancient Athens. Remember what they did to Socrates? Socrates never said that. A comedian put those words, Zeus, there is no Zeus. A comedian put those words in the character Socrates' mouth in a play, and they used it against him at his trial and killed him. Plato can't say the gods aren't real. So he says, of course they're real. Look, they're right there, up there, in the sky, where they can't cause any trouble. And now can we please move on to the stuff that matters? That's how Plato deals with the gods. On the bottom of the circle would be where Plato places the earth. Plato is a flat earther. There's still flat earthers today. Anybody a flat earther? You may not want to. You may not. This is being filmed, so you may not want to respond if you are. At least in Plato's defense, Plato was writing 2,400 years ago, long before anyone had ever left the earth, pointed a camera down at it and taken a picture to see that it's not flat. So Plato thinks there's a flat earth on the bottom, and then the earth is populated with all the living things that were formed by this demiurge, this builder, carpenter, creator. Where do we fit in? Well, once upon a time, if Plato ever told a story about how this happened, we don't have it. But somehow, something went really wrong for us jillions of years ago. And our souls that were perfectly happy fell. Had a long fall out of the world of forms down into the universe, where they kind of got stuck in these bodies, longing to be released, longing to be set free and sent back to our true home. Be kind of like this. So, who wants to be my victim? You pointing at Carlos? Carlos, come here. Come join me. You can. Oh no, what have I done? You can stand right there. How you doing today, Carlos? Good, all right. So Carlos, let's say the phone rings in the middle of my class while I'm teaching. I'm a very patient and understanding man, so I react very well to that, as I always do. I'm always happy to be interrupted. And it turns out it's the office, and they need you, Carlos, down in Mr. Shazer's office. Now, are you on the football team? No. Are you on the basketball team? No. So, crap, if Mr. Shazer's called you down, what's it going to be about? Maybe he got in trouble. All right, so what'd you get in trouble for, Carlos? You smoke meth in the girls' room? Dude. So, Carlos got caught. Give it another year, there probably will be meth vapes. Carlos got caught vaping meth in the girls' room, and he's called down to Mr. Shazer's office, and what are you worried is going to happen? Get suspended. All right. And he says, no, you're not suspended. You got to go back to second grade and start over. So, how do you feel about that? Yeah, do you really want to waste, what, you're in ninth grade now? Yeah, do you really want to just tack 7 more years onto your school sentence? I hate to say it that way because I love this place, but do you really want to do 7 extra years? That's what just happened to you. That's what happened to our souls from Plato's perspective. We were already where we needed to be. We were already, Plato speaking in a different tradition than the biblical tradition, but we were already, the closest comparison being, you're already in heaven, and you come back to life. Well, hang on, I was already there. You gotta go through it all over again. Right? That's what happens. Thank you, Carlos. That's what happens when our souls fall out of the world of forms and into these bodies. It's like going back to second grade. Because we forgot everything we knew, and we've got to work our way back up there without knowing how, without anyone to tell us how to do it, except for Plato. One more thing, I almost keep forgetting this part. This is not the most important part by any means, but it might be the most interesting. Before I tell you how to do it, how to break free of your body, and how Plato can get you back to the world of forms, if Plato's right, one more thing we got to know about the universe. See, the universe is alive. And when you're alive, what do you got to do?
Breathe.
You got to breathe, that's true. Along the same lines, what else do you have to do besides breathe? Eat, yeah, you got to eat. So, universe has to eat like any other living thing. But what's the universe going to eat? You know, this morning, I woke up, got ready, and forgot to eat. Just forgot breakfast. Then walked 4 miles to school. Now, when you forget breakfast and you walk 4 miles, and I didn't bring a lunch with me because that's not what I usually have breakfast and dinner right away when I get home. So when I walked in the store, I was starving. I actually ordered McDonald's DoorDash and paid like, I don't know, $45 for 3 Egg McMuffins or whatever it cost to DoorDash. But you know what? When I didn't have any food, I had to call someone. I had to reach outside of myself because I'm not self-contained and self-sustaining like the universe. When you're the universe, there is nothing outside of you. So what are you gonna eat when you're the universe? How are you gonna produce your own food? No, or you want the universe to eat you? Is that what you're saying?
Maybe our souls.
Oh, yeah. Oh, maybe the universe eats our souls. That would be the evil Plato. I should write that. I should write that novel. No, the universe has to be able to produce everything it needs, so it has to produce its own food. So according to Plato, obviously the universe eats its own poop. Oh. The universe eats its own poop. It's very efficient, right? It produces what it needs. Poops, eats it, poops, eats it, poops, eats it. Now, I have no idea what the first meal was. Like, the first time the universe pooped, what was it pooping out, if that's the way the cycle goes? Plato doesn't specify that. The moral is, friends, the universe invites you over for dinner. You say no. You tell that universe that you already have other plans. Speaking of having other plans and standing up the universe, how do we get out of it? How do we get back to the perfect world? Because this is where we are. Plato doesn't think that the Creator was evil and that the world is bad. He just thinks it's much less good. The same way that second grade's not evil. Second grade teachers aren't necessarily bad, but it's just less good for you. You don't want to go back to it. Later people that follow Plato's tradition will say that. They'll say that it was a mistake to ever make this universe, and that the demiurge is more of a demon, a bad guy. That's not what Plato says. But he does say we got to get out of here. We got to get back home. This world is not our home. This is what it is. We're stuck in a cave looking at the shadows on the wall. How do we get out? From Plato's perspective, the pathway to break your soul free from this life. First, you need to mentally detach yourself from anything that can hold you back and connected to this world, shackled to this world, which means disciplining the body, disciplining the mind. So he believes in physical fitness, in exercise. He's an athlete himself. He believes in controlling what we take into our body. He's a vegetarian. He believes in trying to disconnect ourselves from physical desires, especially sexual desires. So Plato thinks that the path of perfection involves giving up romantic connections, not having sexual intercourse, not getting married, not starting families. Instead, what a person should do is devote himself or herself. He does. Men and women are equal for Plato. So women can walk the path of perfection, too. Whether any ever did at his academy is a different question, but in theory, he would have welcomed them anyway. To devote oneself completely to the life of the mind, to philosophy, to the love of wisdom, and to contemplation on not nitpicking details, but on the good, on the perfect, to devote oneself to wisdom wholeheartedly and to make that one's life. Does that sound like an easy path? Is anyone like jumping up like, hey, that's how I want to live? I've followed it partially. You know, the stuff about devoting myself to the life of my mind, that's meaningful for me, but very few people want to live my life as much as I love it. Plato knows that it's a hard path and that very few are sort of called to do this. Does it mean the rest of us are screwed? It's second grade forever? No. Because Plato believes we get many opportunities, many lives. If you're not in a position where you can devote yourself to the path of perfection in this life, then what you want to do, whatever your life is now, live it as well as you can. If you build homes and are a husband and a father, well then be good to your wife, be good to your kids, build homes well, and be just. avoid mistreating others, avoid dishonesty. And then when you die, you'll be reincarnated in a higher form, closer to the goal. If, on the other hand, you're mean, you're petty, you're cruel, dishonest, hurtful, good news is, as I read Plato, I could be wrong. There are people who are much more knowledgeable about Plato than I am. But as I read Plato, I don't see hell in here. I don't see any game over, you lose forever. It's never impossible, it's never too late. But if you live a mean, petty, cruel life, you'll die and be reincarnated further back. It's back to second grade, then it's back to kindergarten, then it's, okay, now you come back as a worm. Now you come back as an amoeba, a rat, a maggot, whatever, and then have that much further to go. But if I read Plato correctly on this, I think everyone gets there eventually. So it's not an easy path, but it is an optimistic path. And it's got a ton in common. I wish Daniel were here today, because he would have been jumping up saying this. It's got a ton in common with Buddhism. Can't find any evidence that Plato actually had any contact with any Buddhists. But Buddhists basically say the same thing, only instead of philosophers being on the path of perfection, it's monks. And Buddhist countries understand that not everybody can be a monk, or there wouldn't be any Buddhist countries very long, because monks don't have babies. Philosophers like Plato don't have babies. But most of us can inch closer from life to life. Anybody, so you think Plato's crazy? Or he thinks he's crazy? I don't think he's crazy. I don't think he's stupid. I'm not saying he's right. He's certainly taken philosophy in a very direction from where it started. We're a long way from Democritus figuring out atoms and Thales trying to figure out what the ingredients of matter are. Plato has like come full circle and brought us back to myth in the name of philosophy. But it's a vision that's going to be incredibly influential. In a few weeks, as we move forward in history, we'll see how, for example, Plato's got this trinity of the good, the demiurge / carpenter, and the world soul, and how 400 years later, when Christianity is developed, that's going to be reimagined, and the good, the demiurge / carpenter, or the world soul become the Father, the Son, who works as a carpenter, and the Holy Spirit. So there's no escape from Plato. Plato's with us to this day. We just don't really know who it is that's sort of the man behind the curtain. Next week, we're going to meet Plato's greatest student, maybe his closest friend, definitely his most talented student. Happens to be my main man too, Aristotle. They worked together for 20 years. They loved and respected each other. And yet Aristotle did more than anyone else who's ever lived to take everything Plato said and tear it to shreds. Plato's greatest student happens to think that Plato's wrong about almost everything. And much of what the last 2,400 years of history has been a behind-the-scenes combat between the ideas of Plato and the ideas of Aristotle. Because Plato is basically the father of all spirituality in Western civilization, and Aristotle is basically the father of all science in our civilization. Those are extraordinary claims. I know I haven't defended them yet, but we will in the weeks to come. Tamara, Mariah, Stripple, Long, Livy, our filmers, y'all want to take selfies and let us know who you want to work with? Nope. Okay, you can shut her down.